Hi, my name is Cassandra Delaune, and welcome to Architect Live. I am the Sustainability Director for AIA Seattle, and I'm here to talk to you about the AIA Plus 2030 Professional Series. So in order to look at this series and the problems that we're trying to solve, we need to go back to the beginning. So we're going to look at an interesting graph. This graph shows us that buildings, residential and commercial, the operations, maintenance, construction, materials, make up almost half of the energy consumption in the United States. This is a startling graph. Next, we move to the same sectors and what the future holds, where we're going with energy consumption. We all know that energy has costs, and those costs are increased energy rates, resource depletion, and carbon released into our atmosphere. So we see the problem. Now here comes the solution. Architecture 2030 in 2006 issued the 2030 Challenge. What you see here represented in graphical form. It's a measure of achievable strategies to dramatically reduce energy consumption and greenhouse gases by 2030. Architecture 2030 is an independent, nonprofit, nonpartisan research organization and lucky partner with AIA Seattle to make the AIA Plus 2030 Professional Series. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. The 2030 Challenge calls on the global architecture and building community to adopt the following targets you see here. New buildings, developments, and major renovations are designed to meet performance standards of 60% below the regional average. That's where we're at today. In 2015, it goes to 70, 80, 90, and so on, resulting in carbon neutral buildings by 2030. Imagine carbon neutral buildings by 2030. No greenhouse gas emissions, no energy costs. It's audacious, but we're getting there. To design and build to these targets requires a dramatic shift in how we look at design. So we've looked at the 2030 Challenge and what it is. Let's look at some who have adopted it, who think it's a pretty good idea. We've got AIA, of course. We've got the USGBC, of course. Going down the line, we have the SBSE, or the Society of Building Science Educators, AIA's Committee on the Environment, and Rocky Mountain Institute, just to name a few. 73% of the top 30 architecture and engineering firms are 2030 adopters. The AIA Sustainable Architecture Practice Position Statement aligns itself with the 2030 goals as well. Now that we've seen what individuals and organizations have done, let's look at the 2030 commitment and the 2030 challenge. AIA's 2030 commitment shares some similarities with the 2030 challenge, and people often get them confused. So let's look at some of the similarities and differences. One, they have shared reduction targets. Two, they have a shared desire to shift the business as usual mindset. We can see that with these high performance goals, we have to shift the business as usual mindset. How are they different? How is the 2030 commitment unique? Well, what the 2030 commitment does is what we see is the outcomes, the metrics, the measurements of the 2030 challenge, and how firms, this is made specifically as a tool for firms, are reaching the 2030 challenge through their projects. This, the AIA's 2030 commitment was launched in 2009, and today, the second year of metrics are going to be announced. So please look for that. It's an exciting program. Next, we're going to look at the government, but just for a minute. Government and code. It can be a little bit dry, but this one's exciting. The Energy Independence Act of 2007 dramatically shifted business as we know it. Otherwise known as 433, what it said is that this bill required all federal buildings to meet the energy performance standards of the 2030 Challenge. And I'm going to repeat that because it's huge. all federal buildings, major renovations and new construction, to meet the energy performance standards of that chart that I showed you, the 2030 challenge, which means all federal buildings will be carbon neutral by 2030. Many of us work on federal projects, and if you are, you know that you have to ratchet your knowledge to follow those high performance standards, and that involves retooling and greater education. Now, let's look at code stringency. In a very short period of time, we see that code is increasingly getting more and more stringent, and we're going from a prescriptive code to a performance code. All of this is forcing us to retool because we can see where we're headed. And that brings us to the AIA Plus 2030 Professional Series. This program was produced in 2008 by AIA Seattle. We surveyed our members and we asked them, what kind of education do you want? What kind of education do you need? You're the busy professional. We, as a local component, are producing this for you. What format do you want it in? How do you want us to do it? And we did a huge survey, and the information that we got back fed this. When we asked the busy professional, we got the first level of surveys back, and we saw what type of education that they wanted. Then we sent another survey out to say, how much time would you devote to this? I'll tell you what, the answers we got back were everywhere from 8 hours a year to 300 hours a year, with the mean being 38. So we designed a 40-hour program, in-person delivery, 10 4-hour sessions delivered once a month. So this group of people, of about 60 people, is together for 10 months. It's great networking as well. 300 level knowledge. We've all taken Green Building 101. We are sick of taking Green Building 101. So now we need a higher level of knowledge in order to meet the 2030 challenge. High performance education for the architect, and yes, we include the engineer as well. Session topics build on themselves. It is a comprehensive education with leadership infused. We want the architect to be the leader on sustainable education on every single project. Let's take a quick look at our sessions. I said that our 10 sessions build on themselves, so I'm going to run through them really quickly just to give you a snapshot of the titles. And even just from the titles, you'll be able to get a feel for the course. First, we start with the 2030 Challenge, setting and achieving energy goals with the integrated design team. So first you get your team together. Then in session 2, you set your targets. Power of targets and energy modeling. We dive deep into energy modeling, and we give you the tools and teach you how to do it and show you everything that's out there to make it, I don't want to say easy, but definitely approachable. 3 is climate responsive design. 4 is the thermal envelope, which we call skins. 5 is passive strategies for load reduction. 6 is daylighting and integrated lighting strategies. 7 is right-sizing equipment and controls. Now let me pause for just a minute. There's 10 sessions. You can see where we're going. We started with the team. We started with setting goals. We started with energy modeling. Then we went through all the design strategies in sessions 3 through 7. Now we're at 8. And at this point, we talk about site power and renewables. But first, you go through the design strategies. Then you talk about site power and renewables. Number 9 is the handoff, operations and maintenance. You've designed this beautiful high-performance building, and now it's going to live with someone else. You have to give your project up, and you want them to live in it and operate it the way that you designed it. We need to improve how we hand off buildings. We all know that, and this session teaches you how. Last, we end with putting it all together. How do you actually do this? We review the 2030 challenge. We dive deep on the 2030 commitment, which has incredible tools to help you do this on your job. And we review how to make it happen. And we also generally end with a party. So let's talk about the next step. AIA Seattle produced this, and it was wildly successful in AIA Seattle. But that's not enough. We have to grow. So we rolled it out nationally. As we started rolling it out in mid-2010, in the past 2 years, it has caught fire across the United States. It is in 22 components nationwide. If you add up all of those components memberships, it's 30% of the AIA membership. 30%. Now, not everyone's getting the education at once. There's a bit of a bottleneck, but we hope to change that. Let me tell you some of the cities that the program is in. AIA Seattle, of course. AIA Portland, Idaho, Central California, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Albuquerque, El Paso, Houston, Columbus, Ohio, Huron Valley, Michigan, Oklahoma, Middle Tennessee, Atlanta, Triangle, North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, Boston, Maine, Minneapolis, New York, and of course, Washington, D.C. Some of the largest components and largest markets in the United States are offering this education because AIA Seattle, with the help of Architecture 2030 and the partnership between the two, made this program, packaged it, and rolled it out nationally. So I encourage you, if you want to make a difference, there's a couple of places that you can go. You can go to the Architecture 2030 website. That's architecture2030.org. Read up on the challenge if you don't know it already. Architecture 2030 is doing some amazing things. The challenge was put out in 2006. It was groundbreaking and revolutionary, but they have gone on to do incredible things, and you should check them out on their website. They're constantly moving. And sign up for their newsletter. It's a great newsletter. If you want to see a great component, aiseattle.org. Visit our website. And lastly, if you want to know more about this program and how to bring it to your community, if it isn't already, go to the AIAPLUS2030.org. And lastly, if it is in your community, if you live in one of those cities I read off, call your local component and ask how you can do this incredible education. A tremendous amount of intent was put into it, and it's been wildly successful. So here's to high performance building design. Thank you. My name is Cassandra Delaune with AIA Seattle, and have a wonderful convention experience.